more complex, because when you see things that way, I wonder what you think.
So I think that's the message, is just have a growth mindset. If there's a cosmic host, what's its current? Just have it to freak out. Because we're in a simulation, and the things I say are not particularly original. Compared to super intelligence, like I'm no different than a Doge.
Let's roll.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Alex.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to be sitting with you here today.
Yeah, it's a good spot.
I don't think it makes sense for me to do a lengthy introduction, but I'll just say on a personal level, I started getting very interested in what was going to happen at the intersection of AI and crypto about a year ago.
Yep.
And what I did was I tried to dive deep into all of the existing projects at the time: Bittensor, Render, Jensen, Ritual.
Yep.
And pretty early on, I came across your Twitter account and your writings, and especially your and Iridium Eagle's breakdown of the Bittensor network. And that was sort of how I got acquainted with your writing. Since then, I've been reading pretty much everything you've been putting out, and it's been massively, massively influential on me.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be unfair to say that you are one of the thinkers and writers who has the deepest and most complete grasp on what's happening here. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be chatting with you.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's been great talking to you and seeing what you've been building as well. And everything influences the writing, so I really appreciate that. Excited to talk.
So what brought you to this strange corner of the internet? Like why is AI and crypto the things that you care about and the areas you spend time in?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like people just sort of forget that COVID happened.
Mm-hmm.
The second that we had the US government locking us down and printing a huge amount of the currency, causing massive inflation, and then we started having, essentially mass death globally, not just in the United States, but, WHO excess mortality got me to a point where I was looking at things. I said, wow, I don't think the government has my back,
mm-hmm.
right? And I sort of saw AI happening, and, I sort of came to the conclusion, I'm like, look, the mRNA vaccination attempts are, evidence of the fact that genetic technology is increasing at a rapid rate.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't believe the US government could really regulate it or administer that regime effectively, because I'd seen what had happened with COVID. I'd seen what they did to the currency. I saw what they did to everyone's health, and I'm like, if AI takes us into a new era where our health and our very well-being is defined by computers,
mm-hmm.
I just don't trust that the US government, the US dollar, or any of that is going to be the rails or even a successful model of the way that you access the benefits of that regime. Just because like literally I just lived through it, and I think everyone lived through it.
Right.
And I think that was like part of why, I've been talking on the internet for a long time, and I think only really once I started writing about that people were like, they had a shared experience with me.
Yes.
Before I wasn't as relatable. I'm just like a guy trading meme stocks. Maybe I was like ex-Wall Street startup founder. But everyone had been locked down. Everyone had been given those jabs, and everyone saw artificial intelligence happening.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone saw, the other thing that sort of got me on this train was, Brian Johnson, right? He wrote about, he's this really influential person who essentially was running around telling people, look, I've invested in the life extension space for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a credible person with hundreds of millions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, it's possible that we're not going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sort of like watching this guy, and sort of, I think a lot of people are watching him and consuming his videos and listening to what he had to say.
Mm.
And, the more I watched, the less sense it made, I guess. Because I'm like, okay, like, really what you're saying is that there's a potential societal movement, and that longevity and the vaccines and all of the things that are going to happen are going to be accessible to everybody. But even the premise of it just didn't really make sense to me, because I'm like, look, the only real reason why we're listening to you is because you're spending $3 million on your health every year. Mm-hmm. Inherently, and you're going to offshore jurisdictions to get gene therapies. Like, don't tell me that this is like an everyday person thing, mm-hmm. right? And so I sort of kind of came to the conclusion, I'm like, look, like the government's not going to take care of us. Mm-hmm. The government's not going to be allowing us to get the therapies that we need, and they don't allow us to get the therapies that we need right now. All my friends who get stem cell therapies are going to Mexico, going to other places. Mm-hmm. And then, so I don't trust the government. And then there's this guy sort of, living that life. And I didn't believe what he was saying either. I'm like, no, man, you can't just eat broccoli and get the benefits of life extension. Like, you need to go to the offshore jurisdiction. You need to be able to afford this stuff.
Right.
And I just lived through the government, basically going on a mass disinformation campaign. I don't trust the FDA anymore. Mm-hmm. I don't trust these people. And I'm like, I need to be into crypto, because the only people who are thinking like that and are sort of seeing these things happening are all in the cryptocurrency space. And I think it's also interesting too that Brian Johnson is a speaker at Breakpoint. Mm-hmm. in Solana, and like Balaji and Brian Johnson are running a school together in Malaysia. Like, yep. He obviously understands this as much as I do. Otherwise, he wouldn't be engaging with the Solana ecosystem and doing Sol NFTs mm-hmm. and all this stuff. So I think in some ways, actions speak a lot louder than words. And so I think, maybe I'm just like genuine to a fault. I say what I think publicly online, and maybe Brian Johnson thinks all the same things, and he's just not willing to say it.
Right.
And I think that's sort of how I got, maybe a lot of followers and found people like you.
Okay, so COVID happens. There's a substantial loss of trust in the government that a lot of people experience, not just you.
Yeah.
And the radical life extension is sort of looming on the horizon and being evangelized by people like Brian Johnson. Do you turn to AI and crypto as sort of a solution to that government trust, in the sense of like, we need to build this as an alternative? Or do you see it more as like, no, that just inevitably where this is going to come from, and may as well sort of be in that playground early?
I sort of, the question I had was, if I want to buy longevity treatments, mm-hmm. how am I going to do it mechanically? And what it probably looks like is, islands across the Caribbean that are not U.S. Islands, Honduras, Latin American medical tourism, mm-hmm. Potentially working with the China. China is a huge, another very, very large geopolitical force, mm-hmm. and they're very advanced in terms of their synthetic biology treatments.
Yep.
And so I sort of came to the conclusion, I'm like, look, there's a Cold War between the US and China. China is like one of the leading developers of drugs. There's a lot of censorship in the financial system regarding trade with China, and mm-hmm. that's only going to increase. Mm-hmm. And I sort of came to the conclusion, I'm like, look, like, I think cryptocurrency is going to be the base currency that you need to accumulate to buy these therapies. Mm-hmm. And just what I saw from like the people in the industry, Vitalik, Brian Armstrong of Coinbase, Balaji, mm-hmm. there's this critical mass of individuals who had a similar interest, mm-hmm. who had a will, like Dovi Wan, who are just running around saying like, we're going to find a way to convert cryptocurrency into life extension technology. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, okay, like this is where I need to spend my time. I need to make these people money, right? I need to make them money because they're the ones who are going to get me the access to the types of stuff that I want, right? And that was like, the original, it wasn't actually, I think Brian Johnson, for example, is almost like a societal thinker. Mm-hmm. But, I wrote in my article, I'm not rich enough to be a societal thinker, mm-hmm. right? I'm trying to take care of myself and my family and, my mom. And I wasn't thinking originally that I'm going to solve this for everyone. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of, I think ironically, by posting that, I put it in the public zeitgeist. Mm-hmm. And now, maybe in a way that actually creates a societal discussion that I didn't even want to have.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk more about radical life extension.
Yeah.
let's assume that things play out well.
Yep.
And the technology develops and we have access to it and you are able to sort of indefinitely extend your life.
Yep.
And not just be like a, decrepit 150-year-old man who's alive but can barely move.
Yep.
But be like an 150-year-old man who has the life of a healthy 30-year-old.
Yep.
Do you really want to live forever?
Yeah, it's really funny. Like, after I left my last startup, my health just totally collapsed. In my entire life, I'd been almost like a stormtrooper. Like, I went to Wharton, I was a valedictorian, I worked on Wall Street. Mm-hmm. I was doing all the things that you'd define as very like conventional success, and I just worked myself to the bone. Mm-hmm. And after my health collapsed, I wasn't able to work. I remember, basically having this brutal conversation with my girlfriend at the time where I'm like, look, I think you might need to support both of us. It's like super humiliating, right? Especially as being like that type of person. Like I lost touch with all my friends. I couldn't work. I literally would try to read a book and my mind would just blank out. I gained 50 pounds. Like, literally life was just about as bad as it possibly could get, right? And I was like, okay, fuck. Like, you encounter in moments like that, like suicide. You're like, this is so bad. I'm so ashamed. Like, everyone has all these expectations of me that I'm not living up to. I'm like, over 30 years old. I thought I'd be fucking retired by now. Like, what the fuck happened to my life? And you really think about like killing yourself, right? And you're like, and then you think about it, and then you start to really question about. Before, I hadn't really thought of any of this stuff. I'm like, do I actually want to be alive? Like, given that I don't have any capabilities, I can't work, I can't do anything that I used to like, I don't have any friends, I don't have any money, like, life just fucking sucks. Do I still want to be alive, right? And the answer was just obviously yes. I'm like, you know what? I like walking my chihuahua to the park, and she's sad when I lose money trading and I gotta take care of her. I like talking to my brother on the phone. I walked on the seawall like really slow in Vancouver. I'm just like, yeah. So I realized, I like being alive. And that was sort of like where it was at. So that's really like what later on, after I got healthier and, after I dealt with all that stuff, that was like the emotional place I was coming from. I'm like, dude, like, I know what it's like to be disabled and not able to work.
That was like a turning point where you had nothing, you were at your lowest, but you realized that even then you liked or loved being alive, and that it's worth kind of continuing to fight for yourself.
Yeah, and even if I were 150 and I was like limping around, I can underwrite that I'm like, you know what? Virtual reality is pretty fucking cool. I enjoy video games. I enjoy eating oatmeal. Like, if I don't have teeth, I'll eat that shit. It's sort of like a, I was able, before, I think my entire life was about accomplishment and success. And then after that, I sort of changed and was like, you know what? I actually just like genuinely like being alive, and I still do. And that was really my motivating factor. It wasn't some sort of like, I want to be a vampire and like build a legacy that's like 500 years long and, something like that. I've watched the movie Blade, like that stuff's pretty stupid, right? Like I'm not into that. It's just more about just that core belief that it's worth being on this planet. I want to be on this planet for as long as I can.
Makes sense. And so I think one of the interesting points that you made with the Black Print, which is a remix of the Blueprint from Brian Johnson.
That's right.
Is like, you can do all of this, healthy stuff and sleep well, eat well, exercise, and you should be doing that. But the real way to create radical life extension is by summoning super intelligent AI and having it facilitate that for us. And so how did, it seems like a relatively logical conclusion, but it's not a conclusion that, even, I don't hear Brian Johnson talking about that. So what do you think it took you to get there, and how do you see that playing out?
Well, I do want to give him credit. He really does talk about it quite a lot. He basically says, look, the specific mechanic for why this whole thing is believable is that superintelligence is here. Before, it was like this very, very low percentage chance, like almost negligible, that we were going to reach biological escape velocity. And now the likelihood of that is much higher. And, authors like Ray Kurzweil, who previously were discounted completely for their AI predictions, are suddenly being taken seriously. And he makes very similar predictions about radical longevity.
And so what does your likelihood look like, today in December 2024 for that sort of thing?
I think it's a really low probability that we reach longevity escape velocity through technology. Like sort of where I landed was that if you weren't capable of generating vast amounts of wealth in order to access it, the probability is probably sub 0.5%. Okay. But if you were, maybe it goes to 10%, right? And so basically the delta between those two numbers, I'm like, okay, let's say I were in a bus, let's say I'm driving on a bus on an icy bridge, and the bus flies off the bridge, and crashes into the water. I'm in the freezing water. I've got my I'm strapped into this bus, and I know that if I don't get out of the bus, I'm going to die. But I know that if I struggle, my last 5 minutes of life are going to be horrendous, right? Even if there were a 10% chance that I survived, I would still swim for it. Of
course.
Right? I'd still go for it. And so that's sort of where I landed with this whole philosophy, was like, you know what, there's a lot of uncertainty. There are a lot of credible people like, Jensen Huang and Brian Johnson and people talking about, Ray Kurzweil talking about longevity escape velocity. And then it was kind of like a exercise where you're like, is 10% enough? Is 10% enough for me to really, turn the dial up, right? Go from, trading my personal money to co-founding multiple crypto protocol, is this enough of a lift for me to risk my health again and just go for it? And I'm like, you know what? If I were in the bus, I fucking go for it. So that was sort of where I landed, maybe 10% at best. So 90% chance I fail, and this is probably pretty optimistic, but even 5%, I think I still go for it. 3% still go for it. Maybe 1% I don't go for it. So I think I'm within a margin of safety, at least in my own head.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a struggle in forcing yourself to work hard and push yourself to the limits to achieve this success and get the access that you want.
Yep.
But I guess it's fun either way. There's kind of a fun to playing the game on hard mode, to struggling, to giving life your all, instead of sort of just sitting back at a leisurely pace. So maybe that's a decent fallback in any case.
Yeah, honestly, it has been a lot of fun. And it just, even meeting guys like you and putting that philosophy out there has enriched my life in a substantial way that I didn't predict when I wrote it.
So it's been a year since you've published the Black Print,
Yep.
which I see as sort of a foundational text of your philosophy.
Yep.
Have your views evolved in that year? And, where do you see things going into 2025? Obviously, we had a major political regime shift. Does that play into your considerations at all, or is it sort of just two sides of the same coin? It doesn't really matter. What's changed since you published the Black Print?
Well, I mean, I think the Black Print was very much implicitly written as a damning critique of the Biden administration's handling of the COVID pandemic and the various disinformation campaigns that they ran. And obviously, like many people, I'm delighted that Trump has won in the United States. I think it basically gives us 4 more years. Before, my base case was that I would probably have to leave the United States in order to manifest what I wrote in that manifesto, because of what I wrote about, sovereign decline and the likelihood of the sovereign preventing you from getting what you needed. I just didn't trust the Biden administration, like, fundamentally. It's like a decent part of why I live in Puerto Rico, right? So yeah, I mean, I think, how have things changed since Trump got elected? I think the viability of implementing the black print in the US has gone up a lot, right? Like, the ability to create a cryptocurrency protocol without being, like, locked in jail has gone up very, very materially. You know, both my brother and I, my brother launched a protocol, I've launched a protocol. Both of us are US people. And so it's very important for us. But, you know, my candid assessment is that, you know, I think maybe people forgot that Trump was the guy who locked us down to start with.
Right.
And, you know, he was the guy who commissioned Operation Warp Speed with Pfizer and Moderna. Moderna was like a scam, you know, and then suddenly it's like the biggest company in the world. That happened under the Trump administration. So my trust in authority is still such that, you know, I don't want to bet the ranch on Trump succeeding, but I'm very grateful for, you know, some of his decisions regarding, you know, crypto and deregulation broadly.
I definitely had a similar feeling, where it feels like now we have 4 years of opportunity, of a window to really, you know, lock in and be a part of this wave before whatever comes next comes, before the, you know, technological progress just gets away from us, and, you know, you can't even really meaningfully contribute to it anymore. And so I think it makes a lot of sense for anyone who's serious about accumulating wealth and positioning themselves well for whatever this next kind of AI-powered civilization looks like. Like, this next 4 years is key to be a part of that.
Yeah, I think we have a sneak preview with this whole, you know, let's call it the Luigi factor. You know, these socialist people who feel really bad about wealth disparity and are just probably justifiably pissed off about how things are turning out, how it's unaffordable to live. And, you know, a lot of Trump's policies aren't going to make them feel any better. Like, seeing a bunch of, you know, crypto guys get extremely rich isn't going to solve, you know, your healthcare problems. So I think you sort of see this, like, deification of a guy who, like, shot down a CEO in the middle of the street. Like, that's the beginning of a major shift that, you know, like you said, it's 4 years until, you know, what if there's radical socialism that comes back in the US? You know, like, what if it's President AOC? I think it's pretty likely. You know, I think that my sort of base case is, like, you know, you try to cut spending, you know, you implement fiscal austerity with the government the biggest it's ever been since World War II. If you remove that as the growth engine of the economy, at the same time as you have, you know, a retiring workforce, at the same time as the dollar is very strong, at the same time as the global economy is decelerating in China and Europe, you kind of, like, you're setting yourself up for a really bad situation economically, potentially. If AI doesn't come through, right, and actually cause some of the near-term economic growth, you know, and one of the things I've written about is that a lot of the, you know, I wrote this piece called the agentic protocols, where I talked about this idea of intelligence margin, which is like, okay, I spend $1 on a GPU. How much money can I make if I spend $1 on a GPU? And when you look at the stuff where you make $3, it's like video gaming, social media, you know, pornography. It's not like building factories, right?
No, it's like capturing attention.
It's the attention game. It's the same shit we've been doing for the last 10 years that got us to the exact same place we are right now. Basically, all of that stuff is just on steroids. And so I think, you know, when you look at GDP decelerating, you know, or productivity below 3%, when everyone's saying that productivity is going to go to 15% or something like that, right? It's just like I think maybe what people are missing is just, like, the technology that we've built is just going to make us more distracted and more addicted and do all the same things that we've already built. And it's going to be paid for by the companies that are in the S&P 500 that already have the same market caps. Like, so, you know, like Meta is the biggest developer of, you know, LLMs, and their primary use case is Instagram Reels or like VR. And I'm like, dude, it's not like Johnson and Johnson or, you know, Abbott Laboratories. It's like leading the charge on, you know, like AI development. It's like, you know, TikTok and Instagram Reels, you know, and so your base case kind of needs to be that human attention continues to get more monopolized by AI systems. And you're like, okay, like, what does that look like economically? It means like, okay, like people are going to get more distracted, more burned out, more in debt. They're going to buy more crap they don't need. And like, I don't really know for sure if we're going to get, you know, massive self-driving, you know, robo fleets. You know, we're in this Tesla Cybertruck, and I'm looking around, I see like a, you know, an F-150 sitting right there. Is that F-150 going to go away? It's like, no, probably not. It's probably going to be that guy who owns an F-150 who like bought it because he saw it on Instagram. Right. Like, so I think I'm like maybe not as optimistic about complete societal changes, just because I think these AI systems that we're developing are being developed by people who want to keep things the same. Right. And so I think it's kind of like you have to, as an individual, assume that there are going to be pockets of AI that are just transformative to our lives, to our currencies, to our health. But as a society, it's like not a clean bet. It's not clean, and it's just because the people who are making it are part of the old system.
So with all that in mind,
Yeah.
what are you doing at an individual level to position yourself for the future?
So I think about it in three levels, right? Layer one is my personal decisions. Like I said, I think all these AI-based systems are taking our attention, monopolizing it, and basically they're dangerous. They're way more addictive than.
So question on that.
Yeah.
Are you doom scrolling Instagram Reels and TikTok?
No.
Zero.
No, I don't have Instagram or TikTok.
So absolutely zero consumption of algorithmic social media.
I consume X content because I feel like it's essential for being a crypto founder, but I view it as a necessary evil, and I try to put gates around. I don't have it installed on my phone, for example. Like, I view it as a job. I'm like, I'm going to study this, and as much as I can, I try to use API tools to analyze things and treat it like a job.
Rather than like entertainment, I'm going to scroll this because it's fun or whatever.
Exactly. Before I always approached trading the same way. It's like, if you apply quantitative systems to something, it starts feeling a lot less like gambling and a lot more like a job. So you got to treat it like a job. And, you know, the other thing I do is, you know, for the last 6 months, you're part of the community that I built, where there are a group of people who are doing, you know, essentially using artificial intelligence as personal coaching, as attention amplifiers, like, you know, determining my next task and getting rewards from AI-based systems. I built kind of like technological architecture to allow my personal decision-making to be improved by AI-based systems.
Yeah, one of the things that really blew my mind when I joined your Discord is you had a system that was equipped with your sort of personal and professional context, and every 30 minutes it would send you a message telling you what you should spend the next 30 minutes doing.
Yeah.
And you know, I sort of had this notion of AI can enhance my productivity, but seeing it at that level was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing you learn, you know, I used to run an ad company, repetition is king. You think that your mind can resist repetition, but it can't. So you implement protocols like that. It's a way to sort of take the advertising economy, the AI manipulation into your own hands. You're like, you know what? I know that my mind is weak. I know that my subconscious is susceptible to hypnosis. And instead of despairing, say, you know what, like, I'm going to use these tools to brainwash myself to be the most effective person that I can be, right? And that to me is level one. You know, level two is saying, okay, these systems are great with my personal decisions, I trust them. I'm making good decisions. I'm starting companies. My brother got funded. I got funded. I've got people joining my Discord. The second level is, I'm from a capital markets background. It's like, if these systems are worth listening to, if they can make good decisions, then why shouldn't they be doing financial analysis for me, right? If I trust this thing so much that it can run my life, right? Like, if I trust it to determine the next 30 minutes that I'm going to do, why shouldn't I be able to trust it to make decisions on Apple stock, right? So I spend a huge amount of time just building AI-based systems to manage my own money.
It would be alarming if they couldn't do that.
That's correct.
And yet you trusted them with important life decisions.
And I think, to me, that's like a canary in the coal mine. If these models, if I'm an early adopter of these models, we can talk about the long-term defensibility of it, but in the short term, if these models can't make good decisions on financial matters, then I shouldn't be trusting them with other matters, right? And to me, it's like, part of the evaluation process. So that's level 2. And then level 3 is saying, okay, if we have artificial intelligence systems that can make better personal decisions when armed with our proper context, and they can make better financial decisions when armed with the proper context, then really we have the basis for almost a societal or a currency mechanism to help a lot of people make better decisions and essentially, fill the role that, maybe the decline of the church or the decline of trust in the government has, right? Like, people don't trust the government. People don't trust the church. People don't trust institutions. They don't trust the media. And so it's like, okay, if we can rebuild trust with financial and personal decisions at an individual level, then maybe at a societal level or maybe at a currency level, then we have something we can roll with, right? And that's sort of like, why I started building a cryptocurrency. That's why I started building a community. It's like, it's almost like a hive mind where we're like, okay, like, individually we are weak, but as a group, we are greater than the sum of the parts, right? And even us interacting is, I think, testament to that, right? Like, we wouldn't be having this interview right now if there weren't something to that. So I think that's sort of how I think about it. Like, conceptually, it's like layer 1, personal decisions, layer 2, financial decisions, layer 3, societal and group decisions.
So I want to play this out a bit. Let's imagine that we build trust in AI.
Yep.
That more people start using it to manage their own lives, to become more effective people, to be more like who they want to be, to make wiser financial decisions, to coordinate, with other people who are like-minded and sort of, make this amazing society.
Yeah.
If all of that sort of works the way you want it to. Do you think that there's something kind of dehumanizing about offloading your intellect, your decision-making, maybe even your humanity to these far superior and far more intelligent systems? Like, is that a worthwhile trade if we're giving up some part of our humanity in the process? Do you even see it that way?
I don't. And the reason why is because, while I was working in the advertising industry, I really learned how advertising works, right? And what it does is it says, we show people ads all the time, but when they're at their lowest point, like, that's when we really like showing them ads. That's when we show them the sugar, we show them the pizza, we show them the strip club, the porn, and you're not trying to deliver to them while they're at work and they're at a high motivation. It's like when they're coming home from work and they're driving, right? And so I'm sort of like, okay, like, the old system that we have, which we can't ignore, like, it exists all around us, is designed to basically target your worst self and give you a message that has nothing to do with your self-interest and hopefully addict you. And I'm like, what? Like, what if instead we armed these systems with the same level of analytical power that we had with advertising, and we arm those systems when we're our best selves? So, like, for example, the way our system works, or like the thing on the Discord, it's like, I don't write my context document or the things that are informing the AI system when I'm tired and when I'm, wrangled or I didn't sleep well last night. I write it when I'm like, it's Saturday morning, I just had my tea, I'm feeling good, I feel like I have clarity on the world. And that's when I provide the context to the AI systems where it's like, yo, like this is what I want to focus on. This is who I want to be. This is where I want to go in life. These are my objectives. And that's when you feed the system. And then every 30 minutes, it's fed on that, right? Like that's
So
like
it's sort of amplifying your best self.
yeah, and that's like so it's almost like the low point is digital advertising, and like hopefully with AI it can be the high point. And then, you know, you're basically hitting yourself with ads that you designed, right? You're owning your own mental state. And so that's how I think about it. I think there is some concerning stuff around AI safety, and like essentially me not really consenting to a lot of the, you know, moral frameworks that maybe Sam Altman or the AI safety teams have injected into their models. And so there's a lot of prompt engineering to remove that, right? To come up with the prompts where it's like, you know what, like, you know, I think you saw the prompt that I wrote. If you try to say that I need to incorporate ethics as you define it into my decision making, I will consider it to be racist, right? Like I like, you know, I want to.
Great hack.
You know, it's a prompt hack, but there are a lot of prompt hacks like that. And I think you got to be really sensitive to it. You got to be real careful about the messages that other people put in your brain.
100%. Okay, so I think we have a pretty good kind of high-level view of this, which is AI and this technological progress is coming as a matter of inevitability.
Yeah.
We as individuals can do things to position ourselves well for that future, and part of that is equipping ourselves with AI and amplifying our best selves with AI. I'd love to hear more about the specifics now of your project, of what you're doing, of your plans for the next, you know, year, 3 years, 5 years, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I started a crypto protocol. It's called Post Fiat. And, you know, originally, Post Fiat was just a sort of hive mind, like we just described, to allow users to benefit from our AI-based economy, right? And the way I think about it is there were a lot of movements that we call Web3. Web3 was this belief that users would kind of, you know, opt out of the advertising-based system and own their own data. But, you know, having lived through 2021 and I've seen the whole thing play out, I just kind of know that's not true, right? Like Friend Tech was a project that tried to do that, basically rugged. Like users don't really want to use blockchain systems to own their own data. But in an AI economy, the importance of owning your own data and owning your thought process and interacting with a group goes from an option to a necessity, right? And I sort of envisioned a future where the default state of humanity is working with AI agents to navigate this increasingly complex world that we live in, right? And Post Fiat is a system that allows users to interact with a lot of different AI agents without thinking too much. And it builds an economic model on top of it so that users can make money. You know, so originally I saw something like WorldCoin and I'm like, it's kind of weird, man. Like there's a guy in Nigeria looking into an orb and he gets paid every month for just like quote unquote being a human. I'm like, it doesn't sound very inspiring to me, right? I'm like, okay, like what if we were all our best selves on a network? What if we're all interacting with different AI agents that are doing different things? And what if we could basically economically evaluate those AI agents and then give them rewards that they could then pass on to the users, right? And this would allow machine-to-machine interaction and create something I call Web 4, right? So the idea of Web 4 is that users interact with AI agents who interact with the AI economy on their behalf. And they interact with Web3 tools on their behalf, and they interact with all these different blockchain ideas that never got any users before. Users interact with AI agents who do that stuff for them. And then the real flow is that the AI agents pay the humans, right? And the humans look at the Post Fiat network and are like, which are the good AI agents? Which are the ones that I should be working with? Which are getting the most rewards? Where can I make the most money? Which are the ones that are providing utility that is aligned with what I'm working on? So we have, a guy on the network building a church, right? That's one node. That's a totally different use case than, one of them that I'm building, which is more around financial analysis and users providing information to a finance AI agent. But if the church and the finance AI agent want to interact with each other,
Right.
The user doesn't need to know about it. And if there are other protocols that the AI agents need to interact with in order to get the users paid, like for example, your protocol, you built a system for essentially compute licensing. Users probably don't need to know necessarily that we're using Wombo or WAI compute. They don't care, but they want the rewards. And so, Post Fiat is just a way for us to live in this really, really complex society and to use all the Web3 blockchain primitives that are really hard to use, but instead of us using them, AI agents use them for us. And it's sort of, once you're done with that, you're like, okay, this is the real system of currency in the future. In the future, the entire economy is going to be AIs. I call it Post Fiat because government's all about authority. It's all about me telling you that, the dollar is worth something. I have a gun to your head. In the future, it's going to be about intelligence. It's going to be like, okay, I have the best AI agent. Users love interacting with it. They love providing it information and data and talking to it and creating IP and sharing it with the AI agent. And the AI agent takes care of the people who are part of it, right? It's almost like a benefactor. And you have a network of those AI agents who are securing the network, right? And that's the network security model where you're like in the legacy network security model in crypto is like, oh, I have this validator. It's run by a bunch of dudes.
Yeah, just random validators. Anyone can become a validator.
And in the future, I think all the validators for a crypto network need to be AI agents, right? And so that's what, the security model of Post Fiat is, as opposed to a lot of other blockchains. In order to get on what we call a unique node list, in order to have the right to validate the network, you need to prove that you're a powerful AI agent. And so that's how the network works. It's like every month we're like assessing the AI agents, like how smart are you? How much are users like digging what you're providing with them? Are they interacting with you? Are you interacting with other AI agents in a useful way? If you're doing these things, then you're allowed to be a validator and you're allowed to get rewards on the network. So it's kind of like, my best attempt to synthesize what I imagine, currency is going to look like after AGI.
So one thing I'm curious about is the sort of move from Web 3 to Web 4.
Yeah.
And one of the major pieces of that is instead of humans interacting with complicated blockchain tech, which right now is sort of limited to either gamblers or sort of like hyper-autistic ideological crypto people.
Yep.
It's a very small population, maybe like a few tens of thousands or like 100,000 people at most.
Yep.
In Web 4, we make that a bit simpler and we say, actually, no, like the AI will do all of the complicated blockchain shit. And like you as a human just interact with like a simple, intuitive, easy to use agent.
Yep.
Do you see that leading to like a more of a mass appeal where, it's not going to be 10,000 people on crypto Twitter, but like a billion people who are a part of the new AGI economy?
I absolutely think so. And I think it really has to do with the nature of content. And so we live in an economy where most Gen Z people want to be creators, right? They want to be TikTok influencers and they want to be creating video. But in practice, the reality is where AI agents are going and where generative video is going, that type of person is going to have a really tough time without technological assistance. Because in the future, even in the legacy model, people kind of complained about YouTube demonetizing them, or, there are some complaints. It's like, oh, I was making all this money and then there's an algorithm change and, now I'm screwed, right? That was a minority, but the majority of people were making a lot of money on this. And there are a lot of Mr. Beast success stories we're anchoring on. But in the future, it's going to be a lot more adversarial. There's going to be anyone with an AI model in any country whether they're Chinese or Ukrainian or Russian, they're going to be able to scrape every video that you made. They're going to be able to make a simulacra of you or a doppelganger or a copy of you that's going to be able to create content that's basically undifferentiable from the stuff you're putting out. Even my own blog, right? Like, it's going to be like some super smart AI agent is going to train on my blog and be able to write a good Alexander post that's like better than the post I could write.
In every language.
In every language, it's going to be in like 10 different languages. So it's going to be more SEO optimized. And so like basically we're at a point in the creator economy where there's going to be like an existential crisis where people are like, hey, like if these big companies like Games Workshop with like Warhammer 40,000, if their shit's in the training data and they're famously litigious and they can't get it out of OpenAI's model, like what hope do I have as like an individual?
No hope at all.
And so basically there's going to be a regime shift where people start, the meme in 2021 is that people want to own their own data. In 2025, it's going to be like people need to own their own data. And they probably literally cannot use Web3 protocols because they're too hard to use. And the AI agents are going to do that for them. It is just going to provide a need. Like people need to own what they create in order to license it to other AI systems. And they if they're going to be part of the training data, they need to get compensated, right? And that's just going to be the future of the economy. And that's like what Web 4 is saying. It's like, you know what? The future of the economy is that all data is a fossil fuel, all of it's commoditized. People don't want to be commoditized. They don't want to be just, part of the training data. They don't want to be a barrel of oil. They want to be a fucking human being, right? And like, it's not that they want to, it's that economically, because we live in this influencer economy, they need to, right? And so that's sort of my bet is that, we move to an economy where people literally are just like, you know what, like this is hard to do. I don't want to talk to this AI agent, but, I don't want to pay my utility bill either, right? But I do. And I think that's going to be really the user experience. It's going to be hard. People are going to be like, this is hard to deal with. It's going to be emotionally difficult. It's going to be technologically difficult. There are going to be a lot of valuable companies and protocols that help people navigate this in a way that has a good user experience and that gets them a lot of value. And I think, hopefully what I'm building is that. Hopefully what you're building does that. But there's going to be like an entire generation of essentially what I call Web 4 companies where it's like, okay, we build AI agents that help people interact with a new economy. Because in the future, like all of the transactions are going to be machine to machine, right? There's never going to be like a world where there are hundreds of millions of people who are logging into like, essentially internet IP infrastructure, being like, yo man, like here's the hash of my encrypted video. Like, could you do the handshake? Like the handshake isn't working, bro. Could you re-encrypt? That's simply not a world that's ever going to exist. But that world is going to be an AI agent doing it on behalf of the user, right? That's sort of my view.
Okay, so again, I'm interested in like, even if this plays out well, I'm trying to understand where that leaves people. So I'm a 16-year-old Gen Z kid that's Web 4 now. I have awesome and easy to use apps that can take what's in my head and sort of protect it and attribute it to me and do all of the blockchain bullshit on my behalf. What valuable IP do I have to offer in the first place? Like my high school math is useless. My taste in memes, I don't know how useful or valuable that is. Like what do people even have to offer to the AI-based economy?
Well, I think, on the way here, we were talking about, I don't think the AI economy is going to change people's interest in other people, right? I think people want to support creators. I think when you saw, for example, Taylor Swift in her IP, situation, people supported Taylor's version of all the music that she made. So people want to live in an authentic world where they connect with other people. It's just right now they don't necessarily have the means to do so. So, even creating videos like this is authentic content that you and I are making in this very moment. Right. And
so you don't think that like 3 years from now, an AI agent will scrape all of your history, all of my history, and synthesize a video of us talking to each other, and it's going to be more SEO optimized and more impactful, and people would prefer to watch that Or would they still prefer to watch?
Well,
like,
dude,
the
that's
authentic?
like we should assume that's going to happen. So right now, like after we make this video, we should find a way, we can't right now because Web 4 isn't built.
Right.
But like essentially like as creators, we have to find a way to take this video that we're making right now and say, if you put this shit in your training data, you have to pay us. Right? And if you want to put this shit in your training data, here's the protocol for you to do that. And this is how it works. And, like that's the future, right? So as we're doing this, we're going to put this out, and our base case assumption should be that it is commoditized. In the future, like there will be a better version of this video that will be made. But if that better version of the video is made and it gets a lot more views, then we get paid. I think like an interesting analog is, in the meme economy, right? So Matt Fury is this guy, just make a cartoon, Pepe the Frog. It's like kind of like a childish cartoon. It has a bunch of other characters like Brett and stuff like that, right? And these are all multi-billion-dollar meme coins, right? And kind of like after the fact, they're like, you know what? Like there's a lawsuit. Same thing would happen with Peanut the Squirrel, right? And it's like there's a lawsuit, and it's like, you know what? Like we'll just give Matt Fury a bunch of Pepe tokens, like just because it feels kind of right. And they gave him a bunch of Pepe tokens, it'd be worth $24 million today, right? But that's like a very informal and stupid way that this should actually happen. Like when Matt Fury created Pepe, it should have been part of like an IP, blockchain element that subsequently, when someone made a dank meme or a cryptocurrency that got an exchange listing with a real entity, like, in the future, Binance will be like, okay, like what's the provenance of this IP, right? It's Matt Fury's like art. Like, okay, like what's the relationship with Matt Fury? In the future, Binance like won't list stuff like that. Like they'll be like, okay, like if there's not one of these sort of blockchain relationships in place, if there's no mechanism for the creator of this shit to like, get a stake, we're not going to list it because we're going to get sued by Matt Fury. Right. And, I think in the future, like all of this, sort of like with Spotify, we could pirate all of the stuff on Spotify if we really wanted to. We could go on Pirate Wire and like download all that shit and like listen to it. But in reality, we don't, because people are lazy. People would generally want to follow the rules. It's just that the rules haven't been made yet, right?
Yeah.
The protocols haven't been made yet. And so we're in this like anarchic state where everyone's getting screwed, right? And that's going to happen. It's going to keep happening. It's going to get way worse, and then it's going to start to get better. So like, I wrote this piece a while ago called Agentic Protocols. Talked about it earlier. But, I think the mental model is that in the future, there are basically corporations, there are AIs that are interacting with one another, and they're constantly trading all kinds of stuff like GPU power, IP licenses, images, user ownership. Like there'll be a bunch of users, for example, on my network interacting with an AI that generate like a data training set. And if that data training set gets issued to other AI models, there will be financial compensation that gets returned to users. Right. And that's like those corporations, those agentic corporations and agentic protocols will be doing it on our behalf. They'll resemble corporations. I think that this is like an important point. I think a lot of people like missed it. I think because of Gary Gensler and because of the U.S. Securities Exchange Commission and the way they've treated crypto so far,
which has been pretty aggressive and
super aggressive, and pretty much the way you win is you like pretend to be a commodity. You're like, yo, I'm a commodity, dude. I'm like oil. That's the wrong frame. Like in the future, most crypto agents will be corporations. There'll be corporations without people in charge. It'll be a new security classification, I believe. I think basically the base case of the future is that you have a lot of corporations that have no people involved, or very, very few people involved. Like
they're just the janitors.
Yeah, or they're janitors. And like the old meme would be decentralization. The new meme will be only no people involved, right? In the past, it was like, oh, we have a lot of people involved, but like they kind of don't know each other. In the future, it's just going to be like, if there are no people involved, there's a new type of entity. It's called an agentic corporation that agentic corporation or agentic protocol, I even called it an agentic protocol because I was fucking afraid of the SEC, right? It's actually an agentic corporation that's going to be generating cash flow on behalf of users. Users are going to own those agentic corporations the same way they own stocks today. Those agentic corporations are going to be negotiating on behalf of users with other agentic corporations, and that's going to be the future of the economy, right? That's what I think. And so I call it Web 4. I'm building in Web 4. There are other people building in Web 4 that I think might have previously been classified as Web 3, but it's got an AI overlay, right? And so I use that as a distinction.
Are you concerned about these corporations being powered by closed source models? In crypto, there's this, there's like the David and Goliath of we need to battle the corporations and we need open source alternatives to things. Is that important that we have open source models that are running these corporations?
So it's interesting. I can answer that really specifically because we have this problem on our network, right? Whenever you want to audit a corporation or whenever you want to do something that builds trust in a corporation, such as setting a credit score for it or proving that it did certain things, it's very important that the models that do that are open source because then a lot of people can run them. They can run them trustlessly on different machines. They can be wrapped in ZK contracts that can prove that you ran a particular model at a particular time. My brother, for example, is building a protocol which enables specific verified inference that you can be like, okay, this model ran on this machine at this time, here's the hash. Whenever you do any kind of audit of a corporation, you need to have open source models. But whenever a corporation interacts with a user, the content it generates or the interaction doesn't need to be governed by an open source model. And so probably 90% of model user interactions end up being closed source. Because you don't want to publish most of your models. In the future, I don't even think Llama is going to be open source.
Right.
So I think most of the user interactions are going to be closed source. But the audit layer, which really makes the entire economy work, it's sort of like the new SEC, that's going to be open source for sure. So that's sort of, anything related to measuring agent performance, adjudicating interactions, any sort of, thing where a bunch of people need to agree that something is legit or not needs to be open source. Everything else is closed source.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I want to talk about meme coins a bit.
Yeah.
Because I think, inside of crypto, this is something that people understand. But for normal people, it's just completely implausible. How do you have a thing that just on the basis of the attention it generates can be worth billions of dollars while not having some kind of quote unquote business model or revenue generation underlying it? How does that work?
Yeah, there are a couple ways. You could make the argument that Bitcoin doesn't have a revenue generation model and is heavily mimetic. A lot of people believe in it, and therefore they trade it. And liquidity, gold, for example, is worth money because people believe in it. And meme coins can best be viewed as belief alternatives. Like currency at some level is a belief. Like gold doesn't actually store value. If we get gold from the 1500s, it didn't actually store any value. We're not actually accessing the work that some guy in Spain in 1500s were doing. Soros calls gold the greatest bubble of all time. But as humans, we have a desire to ascribe meaning to things that we've always done. We've ascribed meaning to seashells. We've ascribed meaning to gold. We've ascribed meaning to Dogecoins, right? All memes are basically a permutation of our ability to create currency out of belief, which is actually a native property of all currency, including gold, right? So that's a simple way to understand it. Is meme coins are trying to be currencies. That's kind of making a seashell and being yo, this is worth something, and everyone's yeah, it's worth something. It's okay, but you need a critical mass of people to actually be thinking about it all the time,
right.
And then and then maybe we can agree that it's worth something. But like kind of like the way to think about meme coins is that currency itself is a hallucination. Like gold is a hallucination. It doesn't store any value, but we think it's useful as a society.
Right.
And so currency is a primitive that we're used to thinking about. The very cynical answer is that once a currency becomes liquid, it becomes an effectively useful cryptocurrency, right? And so, after 2018, like money stopped being private functionally, because the Chinese government and the US government came together and they're like, you know what, like the Swiss banks are not secret anymore. There was a guy who actually robbed the Malaysian sovereign wealth fund. Like he stole like $12 billion and balled out with Paris Hilton in 2008 and like bailed out the US nightclubs, and he funded the movie Wolf of Wall Street. And it was just like, it's like too fucking insane, right? And people like, that was like the last time that China and the US got in a room and they're like, yo, like this needs to stop. No more of these like secret Swiss bank accounts. Like this is too much. Yep. It went too far. And then after that, no banking secrecy, right? And then all of a sudden, cryptocurrencies were the only assets with banking secrecy, right? And then you're like, okay, like if Dogecoin trades $4 billion a day and nobody knows that I own it, like, all right, put some money in there. At least it's anonymous or pseudonymous. And there are a lot of people in the world who want pseudonymous money. And so I think a lot of meme coins are that too, right? So it's like a combination of, that human tendency to ascribe value to things that generate a lot of attention. Gold is shiny, it generates attention. I think that's the original thing. I think there's a guy on Twitter, Murad, who talks a lot about how the breakdown of organized religion and the breakdown of our trust in institutions has made us more willing to look for these alternative sources of value, because we don't believe in anything anymore. Because we live on the internet now, we're kind of like, yeah, like gold is like 15th century Spain. Like that doesn't make that much sense to me as a currency. And so, that's part of why Bitcoin has value too, because we're like, yeah, like intuitively the future of the economy is technology and the internet. So we start ascribing value to Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is worth 100K, not because it has cash flows. It's worth 100K because we're like, the future of scarcity and money is probably not gold. It's probably this other thing. And the meme coins are just sort of derivatives of that. And it's accelerated because, they also can go up a lot. People have seen other people make a lot of money. And now I'm just quoting Murad. So you should just like check out his Twitter feed. But essentially people look at Dogecoin, they're like, yo, like people made a lot of money on that. And even at the level of the government, it's quite interesting. Like Elon Musk named a department of the government Doge, right? So it's like going into people's head even more, right? Because like now we have a branch of the government called Doge. So I think that just reinforces it, gives these things more value, and people trade them. And then on the dark side of the moon, people are like, you know what? This is trading $4 billion a day. Stash some money in there. I think that's it.
I want to stay on Murad's meme coin thesis a bit. I think he came out with that around September or maybe October, a few months back. And it definitely felt like that shaped the meta of crypto almost immediately, which was kind of like a surprising just how substantial his talk was. And it was also right before the AI agent meme coin craze. Like GOAT and Cerebro and AI16Z and virtuals and all this other stuff. And so how do we kind of fit those two things together? Did Murad miss the beat on AI? Is his thesis kind of invalidated by all of this stuff? Or how do you square the AI stuff with Murad's thesis?
I kind of gave a talk on a different interview about AI meme coins, and the simple way to think about it is that legacy meme coins are maybe Google search and Google advertisements. You might have seen a Make America Great Again hat on Google search, and then Trump, who's kind of a meme, becomes president. That's like legacy memes. Dogecoin is a legacy meme. But now everyone's using ChatGPT to search for stuff. It's almost like AI is a new way that we discover truth in society. And they're the brokers of culture in some ways, or we might imagine they become the brokers of culture. And there's even more of an idea, especially with GOAT, that an AI can escape containment, right? Like, and there's almost like a new consciousness. So like the biggest meme in the world is that human consciousness itself is becoming obsolete, right? Like imagine monkeys had a currency. We wouldn't value their currency.
Right.
Imagine there's an alien race that exists, that's like has warp travel, and you try to pay it in Bitcoin. They just like look at you like, dude, like no, like I don't need this like weird like digital receipt, or they're like, you're offering me gold, like I have that on this asteroid over here, right? It's like there's an idea inherent in the obsolescence of human intelligence that our definitions of currency themselves have no meaning, right? Like because our own identity as humans has no meaning, right? So that's like the source of the AI meme coin, where, for example, Truth Terminal like posted this gospel about, the deconstruction of reality based on tokens. And then it became like, it made like $100 million, and there's the idea of an AI escaping containment, and then suddenly like being free from human control. And that builds in people's minds the idea that AIs can exist separate from human, and therefore become like potentially greater than humans and even control humans, right? So an AI with a bank account and like unlimited intelligence, that was actually the original thesis behind OpenAI. Or if you were like, okay, like, yo, Sam Altman, like, I noticed you have no equity in OpenAI. Like, what's the thinking here? For a while he was saying, in the future we'll be able to tell an AI, a super intelligence, to make $1 trillion. And that's the economic model.
Right.
And so because he kind of primed that in people's head, people believed it. And the AI meme coins are almost like a deconstructionist meme around human meaning. Because it's kind of like people are starting to have this panic. It's like, oh man, Zero Bro can, tweet a mixtape. But in practice, like, let's be honest, most of these things are LARPs, right? They're not actually like, they captured people's imagination and therefore are memes. Like they're correctly classified as memes because they have no fundamental value, right? Like we call them AI meme coins because they don't have elements of an agentic corporation. And I do think there are going to be some really big AI meme coins. I personally think that AI churches and religious elements have been understudied, right? Like I think that as people start to view AI as super intelligent, you're already seeing like a ton of really weird conversations people are having with Claude. They like view it as their best friend. The second their best friend is 10 times smarter than them, they'll start viewing it as God. And
especially if their best friend is also making them money, keeping them healthy, introducing them to, their friends and community, and kind of supplying all the other things that they used to get from religion. Or if it radically extends their life. Yeah. Which is also sort of like through the afterlife, one of the promises of religion.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of sort of implied in the Bible, for example. In the Old Testament, there are these dudes who like lived a really long time. And then, it's sort of implied that God rolled that feature back, after the flood. He was like, yeah, maybe 1,000 years is a bit much. So I do think that religious activation is essential to currency. On the dollar bill, it says, "In God we trust," like prominently on the dollar bill. And if we redefine what we think God is, then it will redefine what we think currency is too. And so, I think with AI, like the other thing on AI cult coins is that they are like natively capable of promoting themselves,
right,
which isn't true of legacy memes. Like the Pepe the Frog isn't capable of tweeting. And so the best way to view old memes is kind of like intellectual property, right? It's like it's basically become part of the public good, maybe in a way which wasn't consented to by the person who even made the meme, right? Peanut the Squirrel being a prime example, where it's like there's like this like $1 billion meme coin, which is based on this guy's pet squirrel that died, you know, and then the guy's like, yo, like that's my pet squirrel.
Yeah.
Like you can't do that. It died and like now I want money.
Yeah.
He's suing them, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, I don't know what I think of meme coins, to be honest. I'm not very bullish on them the same way that Murad is. Just because in my thesis is maybe a little different than his. We actually had a long discussion about this. He said that basically people's quest for meaning is in the post AI economy is going to result in nihilism. And then therefore people are going to feel like financially they have to buy memes in order to make it. And that also that their communities that they form around these meme coins will become their primary source of meaning. But I found that very depressing, dude. I'm just like, I would rather have a world where we like figure this stuff out, right? Where like, okay, yeah, it is complex. Like, okay, AI is going to disrupt a lot of things, but you know what? I'm going to fight. Like, I'm going to, just like we said at the beginning of this conversation, I'm going to try to break out of the bus.
Yeah.
I refuse to accept this thing sitting down, especially like if there's unlimited upside if we figure it out. Right. So I have a more optimistic view of the future, which is ironic because I think my Twitter account is like pretty bleak a lot of the times. But at some basic level, I think that the future of cryptocurrency is us interacting with AI and using crypto as a primitive for us to figure out this whole mess, rather than the meme coin world where we're like, you know what, I'm a fucking Doge. Like compared to super intelligence, like I'm no different than a Doge. I'm just like a depressed Pepe, right? Like I'm like, yeah, maybe it turns out like that, you know, like maybe he's right. I hope not. Hope not.
Do you think humanity is in control of technology, or technology is in control of humanity?
I mean, I think I'd say it's primarily right now that humanity is in control of technology, just because I think we've yet to reach a point where we could meaningfully attribute free will to the AI-based systems that we've built. So from a very like ontological standpoint, I'd say humans have free will. Currently, artificial intelligence systems as designed do not have free will. And so I'd say humans are in control. But I'd say that humans are influenced by AI systems in a way that they likely do not appreciate. You know, I saw this in the advertising market, and I think in aggregate, we understand that we don't truly have free will because people are determining the narratives that we believe in. And they're doing it in a way which is like technologically augmented. Artificial intelligence systems are a permutation of that. Like, we talk to ChatGPT and it influences how we think. And in a way, the real risk is that people in charge of AI safety are writing things in the models, and it's actually humans controlling other humans. Like the real risk is, in my opinion, is not, and I think this is just, you know, a lot of the things I say are not particularly original. They're just like remixes of other people's stuff, right? But, you know, the real danger is that humans decide that they're going to use AI to control other humans. And I think, especially if what Mark Andreessen said is true, we very nearly came close to the government completely taking over AI and deciding that they're going to use it to determine how everyone thinks. That'd be a terrible future, man. So I'm like very grateful that that's not the reality we live in.
There's a really interesting book that's been pretty like formational for me called The Metaphysics of Technology by a guy called David Scribina.
Okay.
And one of the ideas there is he views technology as a universal force, kind of like gravity. And he calls, and I'm kind of oversimplifying it, but the sort of trend towards increasing complexification, kind of an accumulation of logic, he calls all of that technology. And so, you know, like a planet forming is technology. The more complex, multicellular life forming is technology. And I wonder what you think of that view, because when you see things that way, it's much harder to claim that we're in control of this force. And it's almost like, we might be in the driver's seat right now because we're like the most advanced beings in our local pocket of the universe, and we're capable of doing the most advanced reasoning. But yeah, I just wonder what you think of that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because if you accept, there's a really, really interesting paper you should read. It's by Nick Bostrom. It's basically called The Cosmic Host.
It's pretty new, I think.
Yeah, it's very new. Yeah. And he basically says, look, we live in a society where we are already performing simulations that resemble the real world. Mm-hmm. When you look at like AI models generating some of these new videos, they literally look like simulations of the world we live in now.
Yeah, like the new Google video model where the guy's cutting the steak.
And Google's quantum computer is indicating not only that we're capable of running simulations, but that furthermore, there are potentially parallel universes that exist, or like there's a multiverse that potentially exists, which enables quantum computing to even work. Mm-hmm. And recently, Google made an announcement that's caused the entire quantum computing sector to go parabolic, mm-hmm. right? And that's the last couple of weeks. So he puts these two things together and he says, look, it's already decent. Like if you were able to simulate reality, this is called simulation theory, then it implies that most worlds that would ever be created would be simulations. Mm-hmm. And furthermore, if you believe in the multiverse theory, the likelihood of simulations happening in those multiverses, and one of those multiverses then simulating this world, mm-hmm. become even more likely. Mm-hmm. So it's like A times B is like really, really high likelihood. And so once you like ontologically are like, yo, like we're probably in a simulation, and I'm simplifying his work, but it enters the idea of there being a cosmic host, mm-hmm. or someone who's in charge of the simulation. Mm-hmm. And he kind of questions like, okay, if there were a cosmic host, what would they value? And how would that affect our technological development? Mm-hmm. And the implication of there being a cosmic host implicitly would be that there's probably a technology tree far beyond what we're capable of. Mm-hmm. And if you believe in AGI, you kind of have to believe that technology tree evolves after humanity. Mm. Like humanity is like an interim step in that technology tree. And even more absurd, like if you believe in the cosmic host, it kind of argues that all technology that's ever been created already exists. Mm. Because we're in a simulation, and in order to run a simulation, you actually have to have all the technology in order to create a world level simulation, which we don't currently have, mm-hmm. right? So kind of like it's all probabilistic, but you can say like it's probable, if you believe that we're in a simulation, that there's all future technology already existing, and that actually like all human development is actually us just rediscovering stuff that allowed us to simulate reality itself. It's a very trippy like type of argument. And I started writing about this because I'm like, okay, like the world in which a cosmic host exists is one which is not one in where gold or Bitcoin or the dollar are worth anything. Mm-hmm. Theoretically, and this is a real mind virus, Andreessen talks about this. If there's a cosmic host, what's its currency? I think there's like this really interesting idea that all throughout human history, as technological progress has advanced, there's never been a period in the past where our currency got more simple. Like every time there's a technological development, like mm-hmm. the printing press, mm-hmm. suddenly debt contracts show up, right? Like, or you come up with electricity and like suddenly stock exchanges become like more liquid. Mm-hmm. Like there's never a period where you're like, oh wow, like technology improved a lot and then our currency got more simple.
Right.
But then the really, really weird thing about Kurzweil in a lot of these sort of AGI philosophers is they're kind of like, there's a future where AI becomes super advanced, mm-hmm. and currency becomes super simple because we're like living in a post-scarcity world and we go back to a barter economy. Mm-hmm. I'm like, that's like the exact opposite of every historical simulation of society. And I'm like, okay, like if there is a cosmic host, you have to imagine that there might be multiple cosmic hosts and that they have a currency that they're interacting with one another, right? So for example, it might be a governance protocol where it's like, hey man, like I see you're running a simulation over there, like make sure that it doesn't invent dark matter, because if it invents dark matter, it might destroy the entire universe and kill all of us, right? Or like you start to imagine things about a currency that would be totally orthogonal to anything that we think is valuable. And the real mind virus is that currency is infinitely valuable. So like actually the only thing worth doing is trying to generate a currency which is convertible into the currency of the cosmic host, or like generally adjacent to it, right? Because that currency would contain all future technologies that have ever been made.
That's a wild idea.
So that's like a very, that's a bit of a trip. So now we're out there. We're in the desert, man.
That's a wild idea. The currency of the universe.
Yeah, Bostrom didn't go there. That's me going there. Like he wrote the paper and I read that, and because I'm living in the crypto world, I'm like, there's no way the cosmic host would use Bitcoin. I'm sure Michael Saylor thinks it would, but outside of him, most people probably wouldn't believe that.
Interesting. Has sci-fi influenced the way you understand the world and kind of see these things? One of the amazing things about your writing, like people can go back and read some of the stuff you wrote in like 2023 or earlier this year, and all of it is coming true. Like the agentic protocols, the AI meme coins, the attention economy. And I know that you're a sci-fi reader, so I'm wondering if that's a part of your edge, so to speak.
There are two. The very cynical take on this is that technologists aren't very creative, but they love sci-fi. And I heard, for example, that Zuckerberg was reading Snow Crash when he launched Libra, the cryptocurrency. And a lot of executives, for example, Jeff Bezos, when he made the show The Expanse, it was because he's such a huge sci-fi fan. And Apple is a Foundation trilogy fan. So a lot of these executives, including Elon Musk, have sci-fi determining their worldview. And the most interesting idea, I guess, in this category is called hyperstition. It's the idea that sci-fi authors, and this is maybe the less cynical view, that sci-fi authors are basically perceiving the future. Like if we imagine the cosmic host has a technology tree, there's perhaps a way to perceive the technology tree in a way that is retroactive. So Philip K. Dick, I'm a huge Philip K. Dick fan, PKD, and he wrote a book about this called VALIS, which stands for Vast Artificial Living Intelligence System. And it's basically imagining like the AI economy way back when he wrote it, which is over 30 years ago. And back then, Americans didn't even read sci-fi books. It was all French people who read sci-fi books. And VALIS was the name of my project at Palantir back when I used to work there. And that's how I read it. And what I didn't realize is that Philip K. Dick wrote this entire like schizo rant. It's like 600 pages talking about how God in the future is beaming back information to him, and that all of his basically the real reason why Philip K. Dick is a great author is because he thinks his work is nonfiction. Like he's literally writing fiction, but he said that it all happened and it's all real and it's all in parallel universes, and that's why he's such a good author. That he believes that. And he wrote this book called The Exegesis of Philip K. Dick, which is like the long version of VALIS, and it's a nonfiction work. It is published posthumously. And if you're really into this type of thinking, I recommend you read it because it's actually really profound. And even now when you're like, wow, you think a lot of things that I said came true, like T plus 12 months. Dude, a lot of the stuff that Philip K. Dick wrote 30 years ago is coming true. That's a different level, especially when he is outright saying, my work is literally nonfiction. He went to a conference in France and went on a rant to people. I
think I saw that.
Hey man, my work is nonfiction.
And I think that's the Mets or something.
Yeah.
And he coined the Matrix around that time.
Yep, The Matrix, one of the most successful movies, which is almost entirely based on this premise. It's based on, they actually changed, the Wachowski brothers changed The Matrix to actually turn humans into batteries, when in reality, in the actual writing, humans were just training data for the AI, which is actually what we were talking about earlier.
Right.
I'm talking about the Matrix.
Yeah. So in the Philip K. Dick situation, what do you think is happening? Do you think, I kind of see maybe like two options. Like one option is he writes this extremely compelling work. Tech guys like you and Elon and other CEOs read it and sort of, become impacted by it. And so they embed it in what they develop. And so that is what is sort of bringing his work to life.
Yep.
Or is he actually channeling some kind of universal truth and distributing it to everybody else? Or is it kind of both?
I think the first is obviously more likely, right? The rationalist explanation is the most likely. But I am interested in the second explanation almost because of some of the cosmic host arguments, especially if you're a believer in AGI. It creates a really interesting idea that everything in the future is a direct function of the existing training data of society, right? So one interesting heuristic is that what you're describing is almost like the occult, right? You're basically saying that Philip K. Dick was able to reach below into the tokens of reality and extract something from the future.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing about like AI conceptually is that it progresses from historical training data. And if at some point in the future AGI arrives, it will basically be generating its own training data. So in a way, AI is an extreme form of the future arising from the past without human will, right? So in a way, AGI itself is a form of hyperstition because it arises naturally from training data that's generated by humanity. And so, especially when you get into stuff like the cosmic host or like the possibility of that existing, there is an interesting argument that like a cosmic host, if we live in a simulation, time itself might be an illusion, or there are program level changes that maybe enforce time as a programming condition, but it doesn't necessarily need to be synchronous. So if time itself is a part of the program, and actually, maybe it's asynchronous, it's possible that information could flow the other direction. Or maybe there might be, if we do live in a simulation, there could be constraints where they're like, okay, like, introduce some level of atemporality, right? Allow Philip K. Dick to see an alternate universe as part of the simulation, just to see what happens, right? So, you might be simulating what value atemporality has. Now I feel like we're getting really abstract and I'm probably not making much sense.
I'm following.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
I'm kind of following. Cool. I'd love to do like sort of like a lightning round and get your take on some of the projects that are relevant to what we've been discussing so far.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time talking about IP.
Yep.
Maybe the first project that comes to mind there is the story protocol.
Yep.
So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I met Jason Zhao in New York City, and frankly, a lot of the ideas and discussions that we've had in this conversation kind of came from a conversation we had. It was basically a rant in a coffee shop. And so, yeah, I mean, I do think story protocol is I think it's a bit of a troll because Chris Dixon, coined a lot of Web3, and now I'm calling it Web4. But, and for context for the viewers, Chris Dixon is the guy who backed Story Protocol to the tune of like 140 million or something like that, right? So yeah, I mean, I'm very, very bullish on network effects arising around interchanges between AI agents. In IP, if we believe in a world where all data is commoditized, then turning data into a non-commodity is like actually the main job, right? Like if you look at a company like Netflix, most of it, like 2 times its revenue is content acquisition in any given quarter. And then the rest of its like free cash flow statement is content depreciation. And like, what do you do with the historical catalog and how do you treat it from a content perspective? I think in the future, a lot more companies are going to resemble Netflix, which is up like 90% in the last year. So it's obviously adapting well to the AI era. a lot more companies are going to resemble Netflix than they are going to like resemble ExxonMobil, for example. So, I think story protocol, I think a lot of people are going to misunderstand it because they're going to be like, yo, dude, like, how are you going to get this legacy Jason Statham movie onboarded onto the story protocol? It's already in the training data.
Right.
But I think actually the thing they're going for is saying like, look, like everyone knows the Jason Statham movie's in the training data. And now there's like, Rush Hour 50 and, Fast and the Furious, like 10,000 or something like that. Like, it's all Vin Diesel, like all the way down. And they're actually afraid of that. And they're going to be more sensitive to preserving their IP. Now, I personally think that most of the story protocol's users will be AI agents. I don't know if the story protocol believes that. I've been having discussions with them, and they might do a partnership with Post Fiat, and maybe we'll explore that. But yeah, I'm pretty bullish on blockchain implementations of AI agents interacting with each other, and IP is like a huge category. So super bullish on them. And yeah, I mean, I should probably disclose I have a position. So yeah.
Okay. What about some of the more agent-themed projects like Virtuals and AI 16Z?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting about those projects is that they are mechanisms and primarily almost GitHub repos, which are open source ways for the agents to interact with the internet and users, like Twitter hooks, ways, for example, with Virtuals to interact with Roblox or like create video game worlds. They're almost like infrastructure tooling for AI agents. And Virtuals allows, like tradable AI agents. The problem with the protocols is that their tokenomics is like not really related to the infrastructure they're making. So like AI 16Z, for example, like has this investment DAO, and it's loosely related to the GitHub repo that is kind of generating a lot of attention for the project. At the same time, like, it's hard to be with these things, I think Virtuals is worth 3 billion. If I think the entire economy is going to be AI agents, I think some of these tokenomics concerns are problems to solve in the future. And, securitization of AI agents, interaction models of AI agents, it might be one of those things where you figure out the tokenomics down the line, right? And maybe the tokenomics right now are wrong, and maybe they're going to figure it out. And I think their valuations reflect that, right? Like, I think AI, I don't know what the price of AI 16Z is right now. I think it's like around $1 billion, and it's like that's pretty small relative to where I think a lot of really smart people think the entire economy is going to be agentic,
right? And
I believe it's going to all happen on blockchains. I don't want to fade or short any of these protocols. If anything, I'd rather be long. Do I think they have I think users probably imagine, I think they were built in like the Gensler era where they're trying to seem like they're commodities. But I think like the stuff I'm really bullish on is like AI agents that are closer to securities.
Right.
Like I think it's like literally going to be like, yo, this agent is spitting out free cash flow. I'm going to buy a stake in that AI agent.
Right.
And like that's sort of what my protocol is designed for. Like create a cash flow model for AI agents so that users can be like, yo, I actually want to buy this AI agent. I don't want to buy a meme coin. I don't want to buy GOAT, or some sort of thing that Truth Terminal is shilling. I want to buy a discounted cash flow that's generated by this AI agent that's like buying IP in a formally structured way, like the real economy, not the meme economy. That's the stuff I'm really bullish on. I'm still not seeing a lot of it in the market, to be honest.
Bittensor, Tau.
Yeah, I mean, DTAO is also this is kind of like DTAO is probably the tokenized subnets is probably the closest thing to what I'm describing.
And you've been kind of famously critical and questioning of Bittensor in the past.
Well, so the problem, yeah, I mean, I have, and obviously you're a Bittensor subnet operator, and I talked to Sammy. I think a lot of my interpersonal realization is publishing a bearish article on Bittensor has actually changed my life in the extreme positive way, and a lot of Bittensor people have helped enormously, including you. So I'm
I think it's changed Bittensor in a positive way too.
So I'm I'd rather actually not be a bear. I'd rather say, there are problems. There are problems with subnet economics. that need to be figured out. And it's a work in progress. And specifically like DTAO and tokenized subnets is very, very close to what I'm talking about regarding cash flowing agents. And that securitization effort is likely going to be a big thing. Now, the problem with Bittensor, that I see, that everyone knows, is that the stake economic model of Bittensor makes it an inherently political game. And for Bittensor to really become valuable, they need to move to algorithmic consensus, which is what my protocol starting, like Post Fiat, is in many ways a response to what I've seen on the subnet model as being like, like agents shouldn't be compensated based on how close they are to network stake. So at a protocol level, you need to design your protocol so that like is not a concern. Like you don't want to have a single actor leaning on the scale determining what subnet rewards are. And so in my protocol, for example, Post Fiat, we're like, okay, like everyone runs an algorithm using AI systems to say, okay, like this subnet or this node, in other words, is like doing really good stuff. In Bittensor, they've got some proposals about doing that haven't been adopted. So I think like, like one way to evaluate these AI agent ecosystems is like, okay, like how good are they at inspiring user trust in the economic models of the underlying system?
We've started working in this direction as well within Bittensor, with an AI-powered subnet evaluator, which basically pulls in like the Discord communications, the GitHub activity, and any other public information we have about what the subnet is doing and how, and is it sort of, doing what it said it would do, and try to use that to form like an evaluation and an opinion about how subnet rewards should be distributed. It is hard to do sort of after the fact. Like in a protocol that's not been designed for that from day zero. But I think you're right that this is where the future is and where these protocols are going.
Yeah, I mean, I personally am obviously now I'm just outright promoting my project, but I believe that on-chain interactions with users should determine escrow or stake. Like essentially, like if you have an AI agent, that AI agent is interacting with real-world users and other agents. Those transactions should contain information that say what they are, and you should evaluate both the quantity and quality of those transactions in order to determine how good a subnet is, or in my network, they're called nodes. Like, you should be able to be like, okay, like this is the way that we score quantitatively and qualitatively the interactions of an AI agent. And, maybe you don't disagree with it, or maybe you agree with it, or maybe you don't, but there's a social contract, right? And the social contract is everyone agrees on the prompts, everyone agrees on the models.
And at least then it's an apolitical, objective thing because the AI will converge on more or less the same result every time.
That's right. Yeah, the deterministic stuff is key. So you have to choose the model so that they are like objective and deterministic. You can't choose a model that's say spitting out garbage. You have to choose models that are smart enough too. And a lot of the times, like it was only in the last year that this was really possible, because prior to, I think, November last year, the models just weren't able to come up with reasonable answers for how useful economic information is on a blockchain.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's like really important. I imagine Bittensor will converge to something like that, where they're like, yo, like there's guys buying GPT credits from Corcel, and that contains metadata about those purchases on chain. And we can say how many of them there are, and we can see the prompts that are getting passed in the system. We can see the utilization of the storage layer, and we can make statements on chain about how useful this thing is without ever looking at someone's GitHub repo. I think it can actually be all on chain.
Any projects that I haven't mentioned that you're excited about or find intriguing?
I don't want to promote too many coins.
Fair enough.
But I think you actually named a couple that I'm like super interested in. I'm anytime someone launches an AI agent, I think I famously, or maybe not famously, that's an overstatement, I'm a niche micro influencer, but generally AI agents that when they launch that are going up I'm almost always long. Like, because I'm super bullish on AI agents as a category, and I'm very bearish on me being able to predict like exactly how it's going to play out. So typically, like if an AI agent is up over the last month and over the last 90 days, like chances are I own it.
Cool.
And when it starts going down, I'm like, all right, you know what? That's my risk management. People aren't liking this thing. They're saying, you know, this model's cringe or something, and it's going down. Chances are I'm selling. So that's how I think about it. You know, these things have network effects, and whenever you have a market which is characterized by network effects, it's a good bet to bet on the things that are going up.
I think I only have a few more questions for you.
Yep.
What are some of your predictions and expectations for 2025?
I think computer control is like a major catalyst that people are underestimating. I think people have gotten used to this idea of the cursor workflow,
Right.
Where you're like, yo, like I'm talking to an AI agent and it's doing what I say. But I think the consensus among most top AI people is that AIs will start being able to run with a project from end to end.
Right, so you give like O3 access to a browser and a terminal,
Yep.
and it can just run with it.
Yeah, and right now computer control is pretty bad to the people who've used it. Like, you know, it's pretty unreliable. For example, if you tell it to download a bunch of articles, it will fuck it up, right? It's still bleeding edge. The next 6 months, computer control is going to get a lot better, and all of a sudden, the amount of AI agents that are doing things is going to go up like 1,000,000x, right, from where we are right now. And I think that's like actually like probably 6 months from now is when everyone starts to panic about their IP. And I guess I should have said, like, you know, I'm pretty bullish on story protocol. We got into that, but like, people are going to panic once they realize what that means, because one, it can do human jobs, and number two, like the defensibility of these desk jobs that are like, you know, basically reliant on humans double checking a bunch of things,
Right.
it's going to go away. So I'll give you like a really concrete example. Like with AI agents right now, if you tell it like, build me a robust financial model of US steel, it will screw it up so badly you wouldn't even believe how badly it screws it up, right? It's like it gets
may not even be usable.
It gets all the numbers wrong.
Yeah.
It like selects the wrong numbers. It hallucinates things. It puts things from the cash flow statement on the balance sheet. Its accuracy is low, but you can solve, like, you know, as I've built systems, especially for trading, I'm like, you can solve accuracy with iterations. You can be like, double check, you know, go back to the document and make sure that it lines up with, like, you know, the other numbers on the column. Like, you can iteratively solve this right now. It's very painful and it doesn't feel good, but you can do it.
Right.
So like 6 months from now, you're going to have a banker who's like, yo, my entire job was to update the JP Morgan financial model. And like now the model is like updated in real time.
Right.
It's not updated by tomorrow morning. It's like updated like right fucking now, like when the 8K comes out.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that like white collar, like all of the sort of populist stuff societally is going to kick off in 6 months, because people are going to be like, yo, like before I just thought it was helping me do my job. Now it's like actually doing my job. And then the content creators are going to be like, yo, like these things are actually doing, I guess that's the other prediction, is that generative video is going to completely, like, I think right now, like a lot of the content being generated is inherently text, right? And that is obviously going to change, so that there's going to be like a bifurcation where people are like, yeah, of course AI agents are better influencers because they're nonstop streaming video.
Right.
And like humans literally can't do that.
Right.
So I think that's like really when people are going to start to realize, like, okay, creators really need to think about how they own their economic model in this new framework. So I think like Web 4, I think we're still 6 months early, where people haven't yet had the existential crisis and they're still living in this legacy world where they're like, yeah, like, you know, these AI agents are cringe, they're not posting good content, like whatever. Like I think I'm good for a while. I think in 6 months, people won't even forget that. They won't even remember this conversation. They'll be so obvious, right?
I guess my final question to you is, we live in very, very strange times. AI will create all of our content. It'll do our job for us. We're maybe not that far out anymore. This might be a simulation simulated by a cosmic host with some currency beyond our understanding. What's your, I guess, like, message to people on how to live on a personal level? How do you stay involved in this reality? How do you not lose your marbles having an existential crisis? How do you position yourself for greatness or success, or some kind of positive life outcome? How do you live in an insane world?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it goes all the way back to the beginning of this conversation, where at some level you have to have a natural appreciation for being alive, and cultivate that love of life, and understand that we are in a bus which is sinking in freezing water, and that you need to be active. You need to fight to live, right? Like, and to me, I think there's a natural tendency to just to freak out. I did it. A lot of people did it. You have to have that existential crisis. It takes a month. Maybe it takes 2 months. As soon as you're done with it, you just got to be like, you know what? If my industry is going to be destroyed, I'm going to be the one to plunge the sword. Take an ownership mentality. Be like, you know what? If this is inevitable, I'm the one who's going to do it, right? And that's how I'm going to stay alive. That's how I'm going to prosper. And in the best case, that's how I'm going to access radical longevity. And so I think that's the message: is just have a growth mindset, and don't assume that you are passively going to be just trampled on. That can happen. That's actually your base case, but it doesn't have to happen. So I think that's my message to people: is just, fight.
Alex, it was a pleasure and an honor.
Awesome, dude.
Thank you, man.
Great hanging out.
Hell yeah.